This is an intro to imaginary numbers. Let's say I gave you the problem to solve for x squared minus 25 equals 0. You can add 25 to both sides. X squared equals 25. Take the square root of both sides. X equals plus and minus 5. You can also factor this if you want to x minus 5, x plus 5 equals 0. You solve it, you get x equals 5 and x equals negative 5, which is the same answer as you have there. Now let's say I gave you x squared plus 1 equals 0. Well, this one you can't factor. So if we subtract 1 from both sides, x squared equals negative 1. If we follow the same steps, we take the square root of both sides. So x equals plus minus the square root of negative 1. Now, up to now, they tell you that you can't take a square root of a negative number. But in math, we actually call the letter I the square root of negative 1. So that means this is plus and minus the letter I. Okay. So let's say I gave you x squared plus 49 equals 0. If we follow the same steps, x squared equals negative 49. Take the square root of both sides. If I break this down, that's the square root of 49 times the square root of negative 1. So x equals plus minus 7 from here. And we said this right here is I. So the answer is x equals plus or minus 7i. So let's try to simplify. If I had the square root of negative 36, this is the same thing as the square root of 36 times the square root of negative 1. This is 6. This is I. Okay. So let's try some properties of I. We said I is the square root of negative 1. Now, what if I take both sides to the second power? Well, that means these cancel each other out. So I squared equals negative 1. So that's going to be an important property that we're going to use. Now, what about if I did I to the third power? Using the properties of exponent, I cubed is the same thing as I squared times I to the first power. We said that this right here is negative 1 from above, and this right here is just I. So that means I cubed is going to be negative I if I multiply these two together. What about I to the fourth? Well, I can break down I to the fourth as I squared times I squared, or I can use I to the third power times I to the first power. Well, this is negative 1. This is also negative 1. So if I multiply these two, I get positive 1. If I did I to the third power, well, this from above is negative I times I, and this is going to become negative I squared. But this is negative 1, and that becomes positive 1, just like what you have on the left here. So to recap, I to the first power is I to the second power is negative 1, I to the third power is negative I to the first is 1. And if I keep on repeating the cycle, this is the pattern that I am going to get. So to check this pattern, I can do I to the fifth power. Well, that's I to the fourth times I to the 1. We said this is positive 1. This is I. So that means I to the fifth power is just I. If I repeat that process, I to the sixth, I can do I to the fourth times I to the second. Or if you want, you can do I to the third times I to the third. This is positive 1. This is negative 1, which equals negative 1. If I did this, this is negative I. This is negative I. So negative times a negative is positive I squared. But remember that this part right here is negative 1. So same answer as we have here. So again, looking at this process, these repeat itself. Now, what if I give you I to the 20th? What is that going to be? You could do I to the 10 times I to the 10, which is negative 1 times negative 1 equals positive 1. What about if I gave you a bigger number, I to the 50? Where would that go in this pattern? If you thought about the pattern, you should get negative 1. What's an easier way of doing this? Well, the easiest way is to divide the exponent by 4. So if I do 50 divided by 4, I'm actually going to use long division. So 4 goes into 5 one time, and it goes in 2 times. I get a remainder of 2. So again, this right here is your remainder. And that's important. So going back to this process, the cycle here, anything that has I to the first power, this is going to be remainder 1. This will be remainder 2, remainder 3, and remainder 0. So if I look at this right here, I to the 50 equals to negative 1 because the remainder is 2. Looking back from over here. Now, what about I to the 123? Same thing, we do 4, and we see how many times it goes in. Since it's the remainder 3, that means this is going to be negative I. How about I to the 2,355? Again, we divide that. That goes in 5 times. That goes in 8 times. Again, this is your remainder. So that means this is going to equal to negative I. So again, use these properties here to help you figure out, and that is the lesson for today.